Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. Weldie and Andrew sitting here for the first off-season podcast. We can finally flip the calendar over. Forget about Denver's title, but chalk one up against for conference pride if you're into that sort of thing. But us at the Huskies Hockey Podcast, what do you say, Andrew, that we start looking ahead? 24-25.
I'm right with you.
Perfect.
No more moving back. No, screw Denver. We're looking for the future.
Yeah, exactly. So we're the title is coming to St. Cloud here next year. So let's start talking about it now. And then everybody else can jump on the bandwagon later.
Let's do this.
I do have to say one thing.
You done messed up, Aaron!
I do have a correction that I need to make. And this goes back actually a couple podcasts. Friend of the show, Eric, who was on doing the all-time draft, kind of corrected me and saying that the NAHL does still have that limit of 20-year-old for that league. I did incorrectly state that it was 21 years old. Because for some reason I thought there was a little bit of a change, or that, you can be in for 20 and then you can at 21 you can go to the NAHL, and that's where that's not the case. So I apologize for leading you all astray about 4 or 5 episodes ago, which now is 13 or 14 weeks ago. So I just wanted to make that correction out there, because when I'm wrong, I will, the few times that I will go ahead and correct myself when that happens.
Thank you for being on top of that, and thanks for that clarification. That's news to me as well.
I think Eric was kind of talking about, it had some, and I think I confused the overager policy. Because you can only have a set limit in the USHL of 20-year-olds, which is why they moved down to.
But so both are, you can't be 21 and play in those leagues.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me, I thought that NA would have had an older limit. So
yeah, I thought that's where I got confused. So, but anyway, we got a lot of Huskies talk, portal schedule releases. We got so much thing to go, but obviously the big news that the Summit League here is going to be sorry,
Freudian slip
slip of the tongue there, so to speak. NCHC 2 years from now getting a new member, and that illustrious goes to, I don't know if anyone saw this coming. Totally out of the woodwork. There's nobody on this podcast, at least, that went ahead and predicted St. Thomas would join the NCHC. Could you think of anyone, Andrew? Did anyone say that?
Yeah, someone by the name of me.
Oh, that's right. Him. Yes. Forgot.
Right about this time last year, I actually went back and listened to a little bit of that show that we did. It would have been right on the heels of Arizona State being officially brought aboard the conference membership, and part of our conversation then was speculating. You didn't think that they'd stick with 9 too long.
9 teams?
Nine.
Thank you. Right on the ball there. I was figuring maybe an off-season rustiness from the 9 sounder.
No, actually, I now have the mouse cursor directly hovered over the 9 times button.
It's part of that Riverside update, I bet.
Yeah,
and you were on top
exactly.
of that. That's great.
So now it's just one quick little flick of the wrist, and then boom, I got that sounder for you.
I thought 4 minutes in might be a little tricky for you, but I'm glad to see that. So yeah, we didn't think that they'd stick at 9. I don't think I was the only person that speculated St. Thomas, but that's what I had predicted then. I will say I was a little surprised that it's happened so soon, that they, yes, as you mentioned, it's going to be a 2-year wait for them to get into the league. But with the news coming that they will be the 10th team, and it sounds like it kind of came together pretty quickly from the conference's standpoint as well. Some reportage on the Rink Live. I was a little surprised. This was like the NCHC reaching out to St. Thomas. Like, they instigated the discussions, and it seemed like it all kind of started at the coaches meeting down in Florida, the infamous coaches meeting. Something always happens there. Last year it was St. Thomas and Michigan having a fight over a recruit. This year, maybe some back rooms, smoke-filled room talks in terms of what that 10th team is. And part of
St. Thomas always has to be involved in the drama.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I the drama? No, I'm not the drama. I got to get that sounder now. Me? No. Maybe I am the drama. That's St. Thomas right there.
Oh yeah, lots of talking behind their back. Lots of moving.
Alex Fern also said St. Thomas. So,
but who had it on the record first? Me or Alex Fern?
Did,
I don't remember Alex Fern staking his claim out as early as I did. I'm willing to. I'm not on the X machine, so I'm willing to retract that statement. Yes. Show me some receipts, because I got the receipt of last year's podcast. Beat that.
All right, boom. Take that, KVSC boy. Let's go ahead.
Right.
So, all came together really quickly, and really surprised again that it's in 2 years, and CCHA apparently doesn't have an exit fee. So
another strange part of that, I think that they would have something in place there. Come on, Donnie. This is how modern conferences work. Could have gotten. I mean, I'm sure that at least 7 figures, some number in that range, St. Thomas would have gladly paid. It's not like they are strapped for cash. So it's just lost revenue. But that was the surprising part. I mean, I didn't really put the pieces together, but I thought it was a little strange out of those coaches meetings. As far as the NCHC is concerned, one piece of news we found was that they are ditching the 8-9 game in the playoffs, the new format, starting this year with the 9-team formation with Arizona State. And, we talked about that last year. That was another thing that I nailed on that podcast. I didn't nail the part where they're going to have the 8-9 game at the 1 seed. That was something I hadn't thought of. But I thought it was kind of a clever idea.
Because it's a bad idea.
Well, would you think
from logistically and from a financial aspect, it's a bad idea?
I didn't. My suggestion was just have the 8-9 game at the 8 seed facility. You'd still have logistical issues in terms of short travel and whatnot, but I thought this was a decent idea because it would give the 1 seed a little extra revenue. It's kind of like a gift for them to win the conference. You get 1 extra game, which probably is going to be sparsely attended, but if anything, it's just more revenue for the team that won the whole thing, the conference.
Does that gate though? Does the gate for the playoffs? Does that go to the conference?
I think the tickets do, but the popcorn and the beer and the food, I would imagine, parking. I would think all that revenue would be for whoever hosts the game. But we're not even going to see that come to fruition. I don't know if they had cold feet about the possibility of an embarrassing draw, or the fact that it was just logistically going to be challenging to bring 2 teams into another city on short notice. I'm kind of disappointed we don't even have at least 1 year of data to see if that would have been a decent idea. But they scrapped that. And then it was maybe a week or so later that we heard that the St. Thomas news came together, as we said, fairly quickly. Weems calls Phil Eston, the St. Thomas AD, and hey, what would you think about life in the NCHC? And
Phil, it's Heather. Give me a call.
Got something to talk to you about.
Let me
know.
Back.
Let me know. Hit me up. And Dr. Eston, he was listening, and he's like, hey, maybe this is a good idea. So they are going to be the 10th team. The 2-year lag here. So as you mentioned, 26-27 will be the year that they join the conference. Not a surprise there if you consider what their circumstances are. That'll be the year that their 5-year postseason eligibility ban, like grace period from jumping from D3 to D1 will expire. So that'll be the first year that they're a fully fledged member of D1, meaning they can make the NCAA tournament. So I think that had a big thing. I don't think that they would have let them in had that not been solved or that waiting period not been waited out. But then also that's the year where they're on track to open their new facility, which, again, I wouldn't see this conference making the move for them to play at their current facility in Mendota Heights, which is barely above like the MAC level in terms of facility. St. Cloud might be disappointed in that because at least for 1 year they'd have a better facility than them. But their rink will open in 26-27. We think there's been some NIMBY kind of parking issues. I guess they didn't really plan parking very well, and the natives are restless around the campus area, thinking that they don't know. It sounds like it sounds like a problem that money can solve, which won't be an issue with St. Thomas, as we've mentioned. They'll probably just pay off the neighborhood, so to speak, and solve some, build a parking ramp or two. But that is delaying construction, at least for the time being. But so on track to open in time.
Never underestimate the power of rich NIMBYs.
This is true.
It's what my dad always actually said when he was a city manager.
But
that's actually not true. He never said that, but it feels like something my dad would have said as a city manager. Is never underestimate the power of rich NIMBYs.
Also, don't underestimate the power of deep-pocketed private universities.
The philosopher DiBiase once said, everybody's got a price.
That's very true. That sounds like something your dad would say too. But so the timing here is all in service of those major details. I guess it's possible. Well, it's possible they could have came in 25-26 if they had the arena lined up and the postseason eligibility period was already up. But I just think it makes more sense for the conference to bring them in at the time that all of those issues were settled. So that's what we've got. And, so now, similar to last year when we were welcoming Arizona State in, we can contemplate sort of just give me your impression is what are your first impressions about the news that St. Thomas is joining the league? And then we can talk about some implications, which are always fun to speculate. But first reaction, St. Thomas to the NCHC. You are fill in the blank emotion.
It makes sense. All of that makes sense, and I'm completely on board with it. It's a good footprint. Obviously, being rich helps as well. I do find it interesting. Blasi does have ties to the conference. I do find the revisionist history that I see a lot on Twitter that is really pumping his tires. And it's like, remember, we can remember the great times, sure, and the great teams he had at Miami. He did also start the collapse of Miami that is not being built up anytime soon. So for everything is like all the people are saying, oh, St. Thomas is rich. They're going to have a new facility. They got a wonderful coach in Blasi. It's like, we can pump the brakes on that a little bit, I think.
And his downfall in Miami almost exactly correlated with them getting into the NCHC. I mean, they had one good year, the second year of the conference, but the first year they were last place. And then 4 of the last 5 or 6 years he was there, they were last place.
If I remember correctly, they were only really, at least in my opinion, the first year because of how many injuries they had. Like all of their top line was injured for 2/3 of the season, and then all came back healthy for the playoffs,
which they swept the Huskies.
Which they swept the Huskies. So it's, but so I think there's a lot of like, oh well, they're going to be a national title contender in 3 years, 4 years. And I'm like, I'm not.
People are talking
exactly
that
buying.
with St. Thomas.
St. Thomas, yeah.
Another, I mean, I agree with you. Another thing.
Okay. I was gonna say, you agree that they're going to be a national?
Oh,
title
no.
contender?
I'm agreeing more. Like this year, there was a narrative that started at the beginning of this, like when they beat St. Cloud the first game of the year, and then they gave the Gophers a good game at the X when they had, I think, the week after the St. Cloud series. You're all look out for St. Thomas, and yes, they finished second in an awful league. But this whole kind of narrative of, boy, they're 3 years and they're already right on the doorstep. 47th in pairwise this past year, which, yes, is their high watermark because that went from dead last in their first year to 49th, now peaking at 47, which we've talked about Miami. Miami was 49th this year. So now, again, it is early. They still have the disadvantage of putting that in quotes because we are talking about hoity-toity St. Thomas, but more challenging to recruit in the facility that they currently have, and the fact that they don't have a shot for postseason NCAAs, that does crimp your recruiting. But still, he's been able to, several Minnetonka players have committed there. We talked about it last year on the show that I listened to a little bit of it. I said, give them 10 years, they'll be a viable program. And maybe it'll be sooner than that now that they're in a league that will probably also increase their ability to land higher end prospects. But I still think they're not going to jump into this league as a top half contender necessarily. But they're certainly on the way up because, like I said, the first year they were dead last. There's no real way to go but up, and they're able to compete in a lesser conference now. That was kind of what you said last year, is how would they really want to move to the NCHC because they can maybe compete a little quicker in a league like the CCHA, which I think is true. I just think for the NCHC, I hate to say it, but the prestige that this conference likes to tout it's just more of an attractive home in the college hockey landscape. We're talking about Miami. Are they going to want to leave? This has been another one of these Twitter rumors. Like Miami's really going to bail to the CCHA another time. So 2 years in a row now, they've voted in a new member. I mean, it was a unanimous vote by the conference. So all 9 teams voted to let St. Thomas be the 10th team. And for a team like Miami, which both of these schools, Arizona State and St. Thomas, are going to be both plane rides for them. Easier travel from the standpoint of going to Tempe, going to St. Paul is more logistically simplified travel, whereas there's no real second leg of travel to those cities. But, they okayed another out-of-the-way conference rival in St. Thomas, and from the standpoint of Blasey being one of them formerly, be interesting to see when St. Thomas and Miami, when Blasey goes back to Miami for the first time, it should be kind of intriguing. But I mean, the big thing.
Now, I don't know how they exactly left terms. Now, obviously,
he was fired.
He was fired. Now, how much of that was the fan base wanting him to be fired? I mean, it was 3 fairly bad seasons.
Was it more than that? I mean, when was he fired? Was it after the 18-19 season?
I thought it was 3 seasons that things were going downhill.
We've got the internet. We can check this. Let's see here. I thought it was more of an overall slide. So they made the tournament in 15, and then he had 4 more years. And 15 win season was his high water mark in those last 4 years. So he was fired after the 18-19 season, an 11-23-4 season. And I should say that probably looks pretty good compared to the run that Bergeron had, never cracking 9 wins for Miami. So things didn't really improve very quickly for Miami. Quite the opposite, actually, after they got rid of Blasey. But yeah, whenever you are there for 20 years and then you get fired after an acrimonious run towards the bottom of a league, I don't think that's ever going to be a clean divorce necessarily. But I guess we'll see. He seems, Blasey seems a little older and wiser. Maybe the many years of losing kind of, humbled him a little bit. And the fact that he's going to St. Thomas, yes, hoity-toity school, but really had to kind of slum it there for at least the first year, being the doormat of Division I college hockey. So maybe he's got a little bit of perspective, and he's probably got a better recruiting footprint to work with in St. Thomas. So that's one aspect of it. I guess, my one thing that if you are surprised by this move, it's interesting to think of when the NCHC was first founded, 2011, summer of 2011. The league started play in 2013. But this is never part of like the bylaws of the leagues. This is never like an official guideline. But it seemed like all the talk and all of the press releases, what was the league building their reputation on? It was on ice success.
Oh, I was going to say like-minded schools.
That too. It's like all these schools are hockey first at their universities. And basically in a hashtag, banners was the guiding principle of the league. And I remember at the time, that logo, the NCHC logo, has got the 8 stars representing the original 8 teams, but it always had kind of room for more. It's like you never knew they were really going to keep at 8.
No.
And so that was kind of
and it was announced with 6.
It was announced with 6, and then St. Cloud and Western were the afterthoughts. So we always thought that this league wouldn't stay as an 18 conference. Maybe kind of surprising if you had thought, 13 years ago when it was formed, that it would take them this long to expand. Basically 12 years. Last year, adding the 9th team, and now a 10th team this year.
And that team being Arizona State.
But yeah, but both of the team when they expanded, both of the teams that they expanded to were not D1 teams at the time that the league was formed. Like, I don't think that was, if you would have asked Brian Faison, the AD of UND at the time, if you would have told him, or Gwozdecki at Denver, you remember the famous photo of the 6 original coaches, only one of which is still there, Sandlin. Gwozdecki never even coached a game in the conference, as it turned out. But if you would have told them, yes, your
original commissioner never
he stuck around for like 6 months. But if you would have told those guys that the next 2 teams in the league were going to be what then was a club team, and then it was also the other team was a D3 team, I think they would have looked at you and chuckled. Yeah. And so it's just a sign that, again, maybe the guiding principle of the league is we organize ourselves on the principle of we are hockey first, national power type schools. That's clearly not the case anymore. Whether or not that's going to be an official guideline or just an unofficial guideline, it's certainly not the case anymore, because the 2 teams that they've added just do not have the longevity period, plus just 1 tournament appearance between the 2 of them at the D1 level. It's just an interesting shift that, again, doesn't happen in terms of like a vote by the members of the conference. It's just kind of a natural, organic shift that reflects the changing nature of college hockey as a whole, I think, over this last 13 years. It's more so that they're expanding the footprint a little bit with Arizona State, plus bringing in like a D1 presence with Arizona State. With St. Thomas, like, what are you bringing to this league? Because you're not bringing the prestige of on the ice accolades, but you're bringing in money, mainly.
Location.
And you're bringing in a central location, which I think is important. It's a bit redundant. I mean, St. Cloud is 65 miles away from the Twin Cities. It's not like you are expanding to Chicago, where it's like the team is not in that area. Like, got teams on the doorstep, 2 other teams in Minnesota already, but it is a big city presence that I think is attractive to the conference. But these aren't the kinds of teams, and these aren't the kinds of resumes that the league seemingly took its cues as far as how we're going to organize the league when it first started. Like, if this was like, I'm wondering too, I bet that there was some saltiness in Mankato, for instance, a team that had applied to the NCHC several years ago. Same time that Arizona State originally applied, they were both turned down. You'd think if this was, if they're still operating on the original ethos of the conference, that Mankato, with its run of success in the CCHA and the old WCHA going back a little bit, basically making the tournament every year, going to a national title game, that sort of resume fit more in line with how the conference was originally formed. But we see with St. Thomas passing them up for this opportunity, and not even, like I said, this was a conference motivated move. They reached out to St. Thomas. Mm-hmm. That just is another bit of evidence that they've shifted in their priorities in terms of conference membership. And for a team like Mankato, you got to wonder if these dominoes, like if COVID never happened and these dominoes started a couple years earlier and Hastings was still there and taking them the tournament every year as a 1 or a 2 seed, that maybe Mankato would have been this 10th team. But as it shakes out, it's St. Thomas. And I just feel like the narrative arc of how this conference has operated is kind of fascinating. And this is another chapter in that. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but it's one thing that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, no, you summed it up really well. I was thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in that podcast that you re-listened to, if you could remember, when I was talking, did I say like Augustana or Lindenwood would be?
You've been on the Lindenwood train. I had to shoot you. Well, not that podcast. I remember you bringing it up a few times, and I'm like,
okay,
dude, like Lindenwood, like there was a better chance that the NCHC expands to Mars before they expand to Lindenwood. I've never thought that that's really a viable option, but not now. Not with them making the move to bring in St. Thomas. I still think.
Well, yeah, definitely.
We did talk about St. Thomas and Lindenwood. I'm like, between those two, what do you think the league would choose to expand? And
and I think my biggest argument for it was new ground, a new area in Missouri. So,
which I mean,
I also thought Augustana would be, also a really good fit because of, you're kind of right in the middle between Omaha and Grand Forks, maybe a little bit more south towards Omaha. But I always thought, like, location wise, that also made a lot of sense. So, but yeah, so it turns out, St. Thomas also makes a lot of sense. And then just kind of, reading kind of what Lucia said in his Q&A, was a little bit interesting, a little bit of fluff as well. But, what else is he going to say at that point? But it was, so it's, going to be quite the turn in a couple of years. When I was looking at the schedule for the conference and they were making it out, and just, it did look kind of weird that one team, ended up ending the season not having an opponent, and it's just, an even number of team just makes sense. So, I wonder, that was kind of an impetus of they were like, okay, we need to find another team. What team should we reach out to? Or, maybe that's kind of what Heather was thinking as well when it comes to it.
Yeah, we touched on that on that last summer's podcast, and I said I bet coaches are going to hate that. Maybe if they would maybe legislate if a team's got a bye weekend to put a non-conference matchup in that weekend. And that was another hint because we talked about the 8-9 game being axed. There was I think it was a McHatton write-up, maybe it was Schlossman, but they were talking about the conference schedule was released because they got that Arizona State bye weekend for the last weekend of the regular season. They had mentioned that the traditional rival setup, like St. Cloud and Duluth are the teams that will always play each other twice, at least in the previous scheduling model. CC and Denver, North Dakota and Omaha, Western and Miami. Those teams would always play the last series of the year. One of their two series would be the last series of the regular season. They said in that article that was not going to continue after this coming year. So even I think they saw this at the meetings and they're like, we need to change this. We can't have Arizona, because that's how it would work, because Arizona State doesn't have a built-in rival. It would always be them that would have the bye weekend before the playoffs. So at the very least, they were planning on shuffling that up. It would not lock in your conference rival for the last weekend of the year, because then you'd have Arizona State play somebody in the last weekend of the regular season. That's all going to change now. I can talk about like the implications of a 10th
who's our
team.
built-in rival now? Do we
I don't
Battle of the Saints? Do we go to St. Thomas now as the rival?
I suppose like the easy. Again, you might not feel like you need the designated conference rival with a 10-team league. I would assume that they're probably going to do something like that.
I'm pretty sure that WCHA
did. St. Cloud was North Dakota's, at least for the last 10 years. I think it used to be the Gophers, but then when they expanded, or maybe the Gophers was always Wisconsin. I know it used to not be North Dakota until I think 2003, I'm going to say, is when that became their designated rival. But that never had any locked in, like you had to play in the last weekend of the year. That was never part of that.
That's true. Yeah.
Plus, in those days, too, this is another thing when we're contemplating a 10-team NCHC. Do you stay at 24 league games? When it was a 10-team and then a 12-team WCHA, that was a 28-game league schedule. And wondering if they feel like 24 is too little when you're playing 9 other conference rivals rather than you got an 8-team league now. The problem, I think you either go 24 or 28. 26 is a weird number for the West.
Correct.
We saw that the CCHA the first year, maybe the first 2 years, they did a 26 game league schedule, which is weird in the West because for an even home road split, that's 13 and 13. Well, you're playing 2-game series. So that means if you're going to do an even home and road split, you got to have one home and home, which talking about long travel, it's not less of a problem out east. Like Hockey East would do that. It's not much of a problem because travel's so easy. But in the West,
they got Tuesday games as well.
Yeah, but in the West, what are you going to play a home and home with CC with St. Cloud? It just doesn't work. So what the CCHA did is they rotated between you're going to play 14 home games and 12 road games one year, or then you're going to flip flop and you're going to play 14 road games and 12 home games the next year, which is just an unbalanced for no reason schedule.
Oh man, can you imagine Mayotte just talking about how not fair that he has too many home games? Oh man,
that's another thing.
Just wait for that sound clip.
Maybe
we'll have an early Lowell Sun Sports nominee for that.
Put that on us. We were talking about topics. There's so many of them. We'll talk about this next show because the rule changes. But I did see that there was some tweaking on the pairwise mostly in response to Mayotte's diatribe. So we can touch on that next show. But
funny.
But so that's up in the air. If you go 28 league games, then you're at 14-14 home and road split, 7 road series, 7 home series, nice and clean that way. But the downside there, in the old WCHA, you always were playing Alaska. You'd go up to Anchorage at least every other year, which means you could get some free home games to add to your non-conference schedule. You could go beyond get the Alaska exemption, go beyond the 34 league games. Not playing Alaska means 28 league games means only 6 non-conference games, unless you don't play the icebreaker or have any other exemptions on your schedule, which seems like a light non-conference.
You don't think
slate.
St. Cloud's going to get the call for the Hall of Fame game anytime soon?
Have they ever played that? I don't think they have. So I would probably assume they're just going to stick with 24, which would mean you'd play 3 other teams, 4 times a piece. Right? 4, 8, 12. Yeah, and then you play the other 6 teams 1 series each for the other 12. That would get you to 24 league games. If you wanted to go to 28, then you'd play 5 other teams 4 times. And then 4 teams 1 series each. So we'll see how that shakes out. I would assume they're going to stick with 24, but we'll see. They might want to increase the number of conference games.
Well, you got to make sure that Western Michigan gets their Lindenwood teams in scheduled. So, yeah, you got to make sure they can play them 4 times.
They're like the Penn State of the NCHC with their non-conference schedule. But that's one thing that we'll see, and two, with the playoffs.
So you're saying the designated rival then would be
okay, yeah, let's talk about that. I would assume they're going to keep that around, but as you said, they could shuffle things around. Like the easiest thing they could do is just put Arizona State and St. Thomas as the designated rival, because everybody else would keep
the newbie
rival
bowl
that they already have. But you could cycle it around a little bit, like Miami and Western. That's going to be the same. And Denver and CC is going to be the same. There may be no changes there, but you could do St. Thomas and St. Cloud. That's actually the closest. I think Denver and CC is 10 miles closer, but St. Cloud and St. Thomas would be the second closest pair of teams in the conference. Then you could do North Dakota and Duluth, sort of like a Highway 2 battle. And then you could do, that would leave Omaha and Arizona State, which isn't close, but it's, other than the Colorado teams, it's the closest team to Arizona. Other than the Colorado teams, it would be Omaha. So I suppose it's not completely bastardizing geography. So you could do something like that, but that's...
When I was thinking about designated rivals, that's how I actually had it kind of drawn up.
That way with the North Dakota and Duluth, and then St. Cloud and St. Thomas.
And obviously we could keep it with North Dakota and St. Cloud, and then Duluth and St. Thomas. Obviously those can kind of all be interchangeable.
Yeah. Or you could do North Dakota and St. Thomas too, I suppose, if you really wanted to.
But you have your groups right there. You got that group.
Yeah, I would assume, we all talked last year, we talked about the pods, the 3-team pods. That's probably going to be toast. All the time that we spend about speculating names of the pods, all for naught.
Heather.
All for naught.
Just I gotta yell at her at the next school board meeting.
Should do that. But then I guess the other implication too, we mentioned the 8-9 game being axed before it even started. Now what do you do with the 10-team conference tournament?
That's true.
You can't just do a Final 5 because they don't have a neutral site tournament anymore.
We don't have a tournament anymore.
By the time St. Thomas joins, it'll all be on campus. So if they're just dumping the 9th team next year, the next 2 years, I suppose, I would assume the leader in the clubhouse for the rejiggered playoff format for the 10-team league would be they're just going to dump the 9 and the 10 teams. Because then you just stick with the top 8. Do the conference quarterfinals between those 8 teams, get down to 4 to 2, and then you got your championship. But if you wanted, I don't know how you would really even do it if you're going to try to get all 10 teams in. There would have to be another week of the conference tournament. Like you could do something like but I don't even know how 10 teams would work with. Like ECAC does a first round between the 4 and the 12 teams. They have a series. Actually, now it's just a single game. But you have like a first round with the top 4 seeds getting a bye. But with 10 teams, I don't know how, like, if you have 4 teams off with a bye, then the other 6 teams, you'd come up with 3 teams. Then you have 7. Like, what do you do with 7 teams for the second round? If you give 2 teams the bye, then you get 4 teams out of a first round. Then you got 6. What do you do with 6? So the math isn't mathing. I don't know what you do. Like I said, the easiest thing will probably just be, say, to the 9th and the 10th teams hit the golf course. But by not doing that, that's a little less revenue for the league and those teams.
Yep.
You'd like to think that they were going to want to do something with those teams.
I got it.
Let me hear it.
It's bold. It's new. It's fresh. It's invigorating. No tournament. No conference tournament. We go English Premier League style, and just the regular season champion, the Penrose winner, that is your champion and your auto bid.
You're just going to cut out all revenue from a conference tournament.
Oh, no, you still play games those years. Like, you just fill it out with more conference games.
But what? But so you're just like expanding the regular season? I don't know what.
It's not really a regular. I mean, I guess it would still be regular season, but yeah.
So
you just can continue that on.
And then you crown
so then you're what, like, what, there were what, how many teams that aren't playing each other twice? You would just play more of the same conference teams twice.
When are you finishing the regular season? Is there a point where you're finishing the regular season, crowning a champion, and then still playing games against your conference teams after that?
No, you just crown the regular season champion, and you crown him whoever has the most points at the end of it all. But you still play games while everyone else is having their postseason tournament or whatnot. You're just still having games that count towards your standings. So it is extending the conference season a little bit, but I mean,
what are those?
Still playing for pairwise implications, so it's not like you're going to sandbag or anything.
So it's like you're stopping the regular season, then also playing conference games against conference.
You're not
opponents.
Stopping the regular season. It continues. It's just a continuation of the season. Because you're saying there's what? How many teams do you not play twice?
Well,
and then how many rounds of playoffs would there be? Are there 3?
How it will be this year there'll be 3 weekends.
There we go. So 3 more teams you'll play twice.
Not this year, because this is the last year at the X, right? So for the year after that, when it goes all on campus, it'll be 3 weekends of conference tournament. I don't really know what you're talking about. I have to say I'm a little lost with your idea here.
Where are you lost? Where are you lost? Where am I losing you here?
So when all the other conferences are doing a tournament, I don't know if you're
the other conferences.
I don't know if you're kidding. Earmuffs. You gotta edit that out.
Sorry,
we don't have the adult rating on iTunes.
I think it's just a button that
It's the bourbon, is what it is.
By the way, Heaven Hill 7-year bottled and bond.
Oh, I can tell.
Value.
I can tell.
Heck of a value. It's like $35-$40, and it's like you sniff it and you're in inner Conway Twitty, and it's like, ooh, hello, darling.
Isolate that and put that on the button bar.
I don't know what other context I would use it, but
no, I think I understand you perfectly. You're just moving the regular season to end when everybody else's conference tournament ends.
There we go.
And
whoever has the most points, because you can crown your representative by your regular season
correct.
title.
It's up to the league. Every league chooses to do the conference tournament, because that way they can have a conference tournament, which then they can get money for, which I think is why they do that. But I'll take that under advisement. It's better than any suggestion I have, which is just ignore the 2 worst teams.
Ignore the 2 bottom, which I actually don't hate that idea either, because screw them, they're terrible.
All right, maybe we can mishmash the 2 ideas and just have them play while everybody else plays. Just have them play the next 2 weekends in a row. It's like a home and home for no.
I get an idea. I got an idea. We can have an honorary member that's always on standby that drops to independent. So let's just say Mankato, for instance. So if you're 8, so you get like relegated. So if you're 9 and 10, you play a series, and if you lose, you're kicked out of the conference. You bring in Mankato, and then that cycle repeats. So that's a way to get Mankato into the league as well. And then the last 2 teams, they play each other. And then if you lose, you get oh man, can you imagine the chaos in the transfer portal if that was the case?
It seems like this league makes its moves based on it looks at the sheet of paper, and it made the decision, like for Arizona State to be the 9th team. Yeah, okay, on paper and in our heads, yeah, we'll just have that 8-9 game. Oh yeah, it'll be at the 1 seed. But then when they actually come down to the logistics of how this will play out, they're like, I don't know if that works. They might come to the same thing when they're talking about a 10-team league and how to do a tournament when it's all on campus. Like, again, if this was still at the X, you could just do the old Final 5 format. Just have 1 versus 10, have all 10 teams make it, have a quarterfinal series, and then have the 5 teams go to the X, how we used to do it back in the WCHA days. Perfect. But you can't really do that now with all on campus. So they might think that and be like, God, look at the ACAC I just mentioned. 12 teams would be a lot better for a playoff, for a conference tournament. Maybe this is how we get to 12 teams. It's just like, yeah, it sounded so nice and clean with that even number of 10. But now just 12 looks a lot better. So
Heather Weems, get on the phone. Who you calling next?
Is that our next topic? Like, who's your 11th and your 12th teams?
Who's 11 and 12? Why not?
Well, you got Lindenwood, right? Lindenwood and Augustana?
Probably Bemidji and
Mankato's being perennially snubbed. So I don't think that we can ever invite them.
They're the what's her name? Daytime Emmy.
Susan Lucci.
Well, the Susan Lucci of college hockey.
That means she ends up winning at like 18 times of losses that she'll end up winning. So see you in 18 years, maybe. Mankato.
Yep, exactly. Well, I mean, 18 from the first time you tried to get in. So
I had
a lot of smack talk from us, considering we were the afterthought as team 7 or 8.
That's correct.
But whatever, we're here now, so screw it.
Yeah, and after I went on the record correctly to say that St. Thomas would be the 10th team, but in the months, I don't know, last 6 months or so, I've had this and again, this would be old school NCHC thinking, 2011 era thinking. Like if they were going to expand using those metrics, meaning sexy on ice program, hockey first, geography is no restraint. Quinnipiac.
Oh,
Quinnipiac again, which back in 2011 wouldn't have been a flicker in their eye, but since then, national title, 2 other national title game appearances, basically a perennial powerhouse. And again, expanding the footprint, you're close to that New York market over there in Connecticut. Exactly. So if you set your sights high, and I bet, Quinnipiac, I think, wants to get out of the ECAC. I think they wouldn't mind the step up in competition. I think they've been eyeing the Hockey East as sort of a step up for them. Kind of, yes, it's the Ivies that you're playing with and a lot of other hoity-toity private schools, but it kind of digs down that pairwise a little bit, playing the RPIs and Browns of the world several times a year. So
don't say that to that.
Maybe have them on, but maybe that's when Miami finally says, yeah, we're going to follow the people on Twitter that tells us that we want to get out of the league and go to the CCHA. Maybe when they bolt, then you bring Quinnipiac in. But that's maybe I don't know if I would have like a 12th team. I mean, like I said, I don't think they're in that mode necessarily now as far as why they would expand to other programs. So even though, yes, I've hand waved away the idea of Lindenwood in the past, I wouldn't say it's like beyond imagination at this point. But I don't know. I don't anticipate them expanding soon, but maybe in 10 years.
Not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind Michigan Tech in.
They wouldn't be a bad one
as
either.
well.
Yeah.
So
and maybe we talk about that a little bit. Like, how does this impact the CCHA? You know, they're going from 9 to 8. So it's not like they're at an odd number and need to make some sort of move. But you never want to go down in number. That's never a good trend to lose members of your conference. So do you think they're itching? I mean, you mentioned Lindenwood a bunch. I mean, is Lindenwood gonna, it seems like they would make the most sense if they were gonna join a league. CCHA seems to be on their par in terms of competition. And yes, they're just as experienced at the D1 level than St. Thomas is, but as we mentioned, St. Thomas has the deeper pockets or name recognition. So maybe that's an easy move. Again, we've talked about, like, I can't imagine the Alaska schools would go in the CCHA, seeming as those schools moved mountains to get rid of those teams to avoid playing them in the same conference. So I don't think that Alaska or Anchorage is going into the CCHA anytime soon. Maybe the fact that they're at 8, they don't really feel compelled to make a move. I don't know if this is one of these domino effect moments. Every time we see like a conference shuffling move like this, we get this is going to start a new round of big realignment. I'm not sure if that's on the horizon necessarily. And same with, like, you know, we talked about the Summit League. You kind of Freudian slipped that into the conversation earlier. But I do think that played a role in terms of Fenton being the commissioner of that league and former commissioner of the NCHC. I think that they've got a decent relationship and a good open dialogue between the two commissioners. But at the same time, I don't expect more Summit teams, or like people say, Summit League is just going to replace the NCHC. I don't know. I'd pump the brakes on that because I'm not sure I've heard too much about Oral Roberts getting a hockey team, or who else? Western Illinois, the South Dakotas, both of those schools. State. I mean, I haven't heard anything about those.
I'd like to see a Jackrabbits hockey jersey. I wonder if they exist. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, well, and Augustana's kind of planting the flag as being South Dakota's Division I team. I don't know if the flagship school for South Dakota would be a little. Maybe that will motivate them to join the ranks. But again, I don't see any of those other current Summit League schools. These are the 4. We've got 4 Summit League schools who actually are in the Summit League for the other sports: North Dakota, Denver, Omaha, and now St. Thomas. No other team currently in the Summit League for any of their other sports are in the NCHC. So I don't see that expanding too much beyond that, if at all. So I don't know. I feel like this is not the start of a new domino effect, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think so either. No, I've been wrong once before. The other thing I kind of thought about happening for just a little bit is that the Summit League just taking over and letting like the rest of the teams be affiliate members, and then the NCHC kind of, I wouldn't say like dissolving, but like just kind of reallocating to be under the Summit League banner. But at the same time, it's not like the Summit League has a lot of cachet in Division I in all of the other sports. It's, you know, a mid-major, whereas at least, you know, with it being, you know, a hockey conference for hockey, it does carry a lot more water, I would say. So I kind of got rid of that thought fairly quickly.
I mean, that's possible. I was looking into the Summit League. They sponsor golf. They sponsor all kinds of sports, and they have a lot of different affiliate members. Like Northern Colorado's in it for one sport, I think, and a bunch of other just one sport only schools. And yeah, I bet if there was a business reason in terms of like if they got a TV deal that was attractive, if they could do streaming. I don't know if they do business with Midco. We were talking about this earlier.
I think they do. And, you know, I guess we were going to talk about it when the schedule comes out with Midco, but I guess we can talk about it now. Midco now has, though, a deal with the CCHA. Now, a lot of Midco Obviously they're doing a lot with, the Dakotas, North Dakota, South Dakota, the states of both. So, there's a lot of those types of games that are on Midco. Now, I don't know if they have a specific deal with the Summit League or just the conferences or just the teams that are, putting on those, that program for those, for that area. But with now Flow Sports being out of the picture for the CCHA, Midco did end up making a deal for the streaming packages for the CCHA, which helps our pocketbook because $30 for a month, I think, is going to be kind of going out the window. They were a little bit coy with the pricing, which is kind of interesting.
I heard like $10 a month.
That's what it is Midco now, but they didn't outright say it in the press release, which I thought was just kind of interesting.
Do we know too? With that, because Flow Sports also had Atlantic Hockey. They also carried those games. Did we hear anything about that in terms of if they're going to stick on Flow Sports, or if there's anything else for Atlantic Hockey?
For Atlantic, I have not heard anything.
Well, I'd like to know about that because that will have an effect with St. Cloud's women's team. They're playing. We'll mention this next show as well because we're already an hour in. We've not even finished with topic 1. But Atlantic Hockey is what now? The Atlantic Hockey Association, or they merged the leagues under one umbrella. So the CHA for women will now be referred to as Atlantic Hockey. And I have a take about that aspect of it. But we can push that off to next month. But St. Cloud, as we're going to get to in a little bit, plays Lindenwood to start the year for the women's side, and we're in the CHA, will now be called the Atlantic Hockey for women's hockey. And I don't know if those games will be televised or available to be televised. So that's up in the air. But anyway, we can circle back to that. But I'm curious. From what
I mean, we might as well kind of tackle that now. From what I noticed, like they already kind of shared resources, so this is more of a technicality thing, or it's like we might as well just be under the same name.
I know that. I know. I mean, they had the same commissioner.
So I don't know if anything would change then in regards to the streaming.
But I remember too last year that icebreaker that the women's team played at Sacred Heart, your team, that was like a separate stream. It was something free, and I can't.
That was just on the Sacred Heart website.
Yeah, or is right? Whatever, like Atlantic 10 or whatever conference that they have that they are in for their other sports. Some free stream online. Maybe it would be something like that, like where Lindenwood would just have its games on for free in some capacity. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case because it's Lindenwood women's hockey. But I don't know if we find out, because like I said, that'll be the first series for the year for the women's hockey team, and we want to be able to watch those games. So I was just kind of throwing that. But we'll talk about that next month when we have more time. Do we have any? Because we got some more stuff to talk about. Do we want to wrap up the NCHC St. Thomas talk or anything else about that?
I'm done with it. I vote. Let's just move on since we're, like you said, an hour in.
Yeah, we can touch on this throughout the summer. I mean, there's more implications. It's a developing story as well. We'll keep you apprised, and we like the ability to contemplate as far as how this is going to affect everything and playoff situation. And it's fun to speculate, but it's also fun to comment on actual news as well. And we can get to a bit of that because there's been a fair amount of that in the last month since we've had a show. So what do we got? We got some roster changes, and why don't we recap those?
Perfect. Let's go first. Men's hot portal action. Let's dive in. First off, Joe Molinar ends up finding a spot going up to the shores of Lake Superior, Minnesota Duluth, for Molinar. Kind of found it interesting what Brett Larson said, according to Bill Proud of Center Ice View. kind of the quote that Brett Larson said, it's tough to see Joe go, but unintended consequences that some second or third year guys lose opportunities when you have fifth year players. It's unfair to Joe and the situation. It fits and works for Joe and the Bulldogs. So basically, it kind of sounds like it was kind of Brett being like, I love you. I'd love to keep you around, but I gotta, there's a lot of other guys I gotta play more. So I assume that's, Ryman kind of being in and out, Rogers, O'Coin kind of coming on late in the season. Molinar kind of taking up Ashawn, exactly. Kind of taking up some of those spots to where they can grow and, not only be great second or third year players, but also third and fourth years players as well. So kind of just sounded like a numbers game when it comes to it. So he is gone. Tynan Ewert entered the portal, finds a home for Ferris F and State. A little bit of a surprise. I really liked him. He only played in a little less than half of the games or so. But I like what I saw of him, and I feel like he's going to be, probably a top 4 defenseman for Ferris State.
He'll run their power play, I bet.
Yeah. So, then we talked about Zinger. We talked about Zinger, correct? Yep. Last show, and then Gardner, because I talked about Ben Storm. And then Caleb Tyson, who entered the portal, but didn't get the nibbles, ended up coming back. So he's going to be back at St. Cloud next year. So as far as their defense is going, it looks like we are short one. So there's some speculation kind of going out around of who's going to be coming in, or if we're going to go, one more in the transfer. I imagine if it was transfer portal, we'd have an answer or someone would be there now. So,
the portal door is closed now. Like you can't enter it anymore. You can still leave
unless funding is cut or
coaching change. Yes. So I mean, coaching changes might be a little unusual at this point, but the aid cutting thing, So there are loopholes in which you can re-enter the board, but for the most part, the majority of the action is going to be
who's in is in.
Yeah. Yep. I would keep an eye if we were going to think of bringing a guy in. I would keep an eye on Colin Ralph. Shattuck product, young. He's going to be turning 19 basically at the start of the season, October 4th. But similar to how they brought in Clark, which I thought was kind of a year early. If you're going to bring in a guy, I think it's going to be Ralph, who is on a good trajectory. Similar to Clark, who got drafted last summer, I would expect Ralph to be drafted in this summer's draft. Looks to be maybe a mid-round, 3rd or 4th round pick, maybe a little bit later. I'm certainly not a draft expert by any stretch of the imagination, but Shattuck product got a little bit of a taste of the USHL this year. Certainly in ideal circumstances, Ralph will get a full year at USHL, and that very well might be the case. But similar to Clark last year, there might be a bit of Leo Gruba PTSD lingering with coaching staff and seeing, let's just bring a guy in early rather than waiting too long and then him getting some crazy ideas that he wants to skedaddle. And so if I was going to pick one other guy to come in, it'd be Ralph. But we certainly think that with Zinger arriving from Northern Michigan, Tyson coming back in again, he just might be he played 6 games this year and was fairly unimpressive in those 6 games, I should say. I would imagine the workload's kind of so similar to that. I don't think he's going to be a regular, barring injury, but I don't think he's going to be a regular in the lineup. But we're also thinking Thor Bufflin, who needs to come in, I think. I don't think he has junior eligibility left, correct, especially if he was in the USHL, but you're our rules expert now about eligibility for juniors. So yeah, he can't come back.
Getting better.
So he'll be coming in. I'm wondering
if enough people correct me, I'll be an expert.
That's right. Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm excited to see Bufflin, and I'm not sure if he has like draft prospects as well. Maybe a late round draft pick.
I figured he would have been drafted by now if that's the case.
That's true with his age. I'm thinking just some scout will look at that name and be like, "Ooh, we know that name."
Because I think, as far as like
you're right. He's not going to get drafted.
prospects,
If he hasn't been drafted yet, he's not going to get drafted now.
Yeah. Bernavec and Ralph probably will get drafted. Thorson probably not. I think they're just going to look at him at 5'8". No NFL or no NHL team's going to be like 5'8". Not going to do it. So, but kind of when I was looking at who is coming in for 24-25, and if you want to throw in Ralph's name on the list, he's 6'4". Bernovic's 6'3". We haven't talked about Ocean Wallace.
We're
yet.
just going to talk about him. Yep.
He's 6'3". Through the portal, we got Gardner, Damon Gardner, who's 6'4".
6'4".
6'4", 6'5". So, and even Josh Zinger coming in is 5'11". So there's definitely kind of a concerted effort to get bigger.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of interesting. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's just all random happenstance. But Ocean Wallace coming in, played in the NAHL, and kind of a veteran of that league. And he'll be kind of rounding out the forwards who are now pretty much set. VT Miettinen. Also, I'll just kind of toss in, ended up signing in Finland. Maybe clear the way for a pro NHL run here, maybe next year or in 2 years or something like that. But I would imagine Toronto is not really looking at him. They got a lot of other things to kind of take care of. But I figure him going home back to Finland and play would be good for him. But 4 forwards gone, 4 coming in. So it looks like we're set on that side. Ocean Wallace, what do you think about that? Him coming in for next year?
Yeah, Colorado kid. Looks like Boulder, but he also played at Shattuck. Would have been there a year or two before Ralph, who we just mentioned. So decent run there at Austin in the NAHL, Spamtown. But he was one of their captains last year, and 20 goal season for them, 40-point year. Older player. I mentioned no more junior eligibility for him. And so he'll be coming in. It's interesting, too, considering what Larson just told, whatever the article that you were citing about numbers game, and, Ocean Wallace is going to be playing. So, I mean, it's possible that Molinar's departure enabled Wallace to come in. Interesting that shuffling. But from stat point, I don't expect him to jump into this lineup and even be a regular producer. He's probably going to be in that Ryman, Rosborough, bottom 6/bottom 9 forwards that are kind of cycling through. I don't expect him to be an everyday player, at least in his first year. But as you mentioned, size and it's like a little bit of skill. Great name. I mean, it's Dana Wallace, according to the Elite Prospects. But going with Ocean, it reminds me of a Boise State women's hockey name. When I saw Ocean Wallace, I thought of Maple O'Shaughnessy, who still is in the portal, by the way. Big scorer there at Boise State, and still available in that transfer portal on the women's side. Someone scoop up Maple O'Shaughnessy. You don't want to miss out on that. But so he will be. I don't know if we need to fact check this, but I believe he's going to be the first person named Ocean to play for the Huskies.
I think so.
Fact check that though, if I'm wrong.
I'll take a look at next year's media guide.
But
be listed under fun facts.
It's going to be interesting to see what he produces as far as the guys that we've talked about this show and last, as far as additions in terms of got the higher end guys like Bernovic and Thorson. Talk about Bufflin, talking about perhaps Ralph. I don't think Wallace is in that same category, but you need guys like that to round out your roster. You need some grinders, and this is a guy kind of a late blooming prospect from the sense of being a college prospect, but he's got a pedigree of Shattuck, and so I don't think he's going to be just a practice guy. I think he's going to get some action, and he's got a chance to produce. I think so. He's an intriguing prospect as well.
Just kind of looking at some stats as well and his career trajectory. There's one guy kind of reminds me of when it comes to a couple of years in the NHL and a 20-goal season their last year in the NHL for the Aberdeen Wings, and then end up having a pretty solid career at St. Cloud State, and that's Kevin Fitzgerald. So if we end up picking up a guy that is like Kevin Fitzgerald in any way, that's going to be a good pickup. His stats have shown that it's around that same trajectory, so we'll see if that ends up panning out.
Yeah, I like too the trend of you're mentioning too of a little bit more size. That intrigues me. This is not a team seemingly that's going to be toyed with physically. This is a team that's going to use that as a strength, which I'm looking forward to. It's not something that necessarily we've seen from Larson's teams. I think he's naturally a bit grittier coach, hashtag gritty St. Cloud, than Motzko. Like when Motzko was here, kind of the water bugs was his forte. Not exactly shying away with that with guys like Miettinen and whatnot in the past, but seemingly we're starting to beef up a little bit, which I'm not gonna complain about too much.
Sure enough. You want to hop in, look at the schedule for the men?
Yes, let's. Yeah, it's another. I mean, if we would have done, of course, we were talking about maybe doing this last week because that would have been 1 month since the last show. If we would have done that last week, we would have kicked ourselves once we saw the St. Thomas news, because that usually is how it happens. We do one of these summer pods, and then 2 days later, the bigger story that would have led off the previous show drops. But yeah, if that wouldn't have happened, I guess this probably would have been the top.
Probably subject. Would have been 1A. Yeah.
So it's always fun. It's always fun to see a schedule, and we've got the men's schedule, which has been released to everybody, the great unwashed included. Here at the Huskies Hockey Podcast, we got an exclusive. We need a sounder for that. But we've got a women's schedule here that the great unwashed do not have access to. Neener. We can tease a little bit of that a little bit later. Let's start with the men's though, because that is public knowledge. And we
some investigative reporting here on our end. So on your end, I should say.
Yeah, my crack reporting comes to schedules and only schedules, and I will get that information to you weeks in advance versus everybody else. So that's why you listen to the show. But let's start with the men's. I mean, we knew a lot about the non-conference. We knew that BC was coming in. We knew they're going to Yost. But there were some unknowns. So we've got the Gophers as an exhibition game to kick off the year. That's on Saturday, October 5th. That's at the Herb in St. Cloud. Just an exhibition game, but it's going to have a little bit more cachet, let's say, than other exhibition games of years past against like Alberta, or who else did they use? Manitoba maybe came in once or twice.
Yeah.
I know Alberta's. They had them for at least one. Anyway, Canadian college would generally be their matchup for a exhibition tune-up game. But now you can play exhibition games against other D1 teams, and St. Cloud is using this opportunity to schedule the Gophers, who aren't putting them on their schedule for the regular season, at least in the near term. So at least for the next year, maybe 2, I don't know if this is a 2-year agreement with an exhibition game at Mariucci in return for next year. That was the agreement they had with Bemidji the last 2 years, basically flip-flopped, having one exhibition game in each of the last 2 years. So
Lethbridge.
That's good.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep. Bob liked them. So get the start at against the Gophers at home. Again, it's not really going to be worth anything in terms of pairwise, but it's certainly a sexier exhibition tilt than we've ever really seen before. So I'll take that. And then you better get warmed up there because the regular season part of the schedule, the games that count, start the very next day. Sunday, that's at St. Thomas. Again, first regular season game against St. Thomas. This will be the 4th straight year that that's the case. I am kind of glad that they're splitting that series out. So we do get the home game end of that home and home right after Christmas, right before the New Year, December 29th, which is a Sunday as well. So both these games are on Sundays, which is unusual. But so you're splitting out that St. Thomas series, which I like that.
Kind of interesting to see what time those are going to be at.
Oh, and the Minnesota game too. I think we'll get to the women's schedule. They play that weekend, the 4th and the 5th, against Mercyhurst at home. So I'd assume that Minnesota game's for the men is going to be a night game. And because of that, maybe they'll push the St. Thomas game to a night game as well. It'd kind of be a tough, like playing on the road, albeit it's like an hour plus drive. But if you play an afternoon game, I don't know if they're going to do if
it might be able to do like a 5.
Probably be something like that. I would imagine.
But also, I mean, the 29th as well.
Yeah.
Like you said, if that is, you can turn that into a matinee game. I wouldn't mind that.
We can mention too that game against St. Thomas will be without Brett Larson, who is going to be at the right hand of David Carl again. It worked for him last year, being the staff that won the World Junior Gold. I believe the whole staff's returning, which means Reboyne as well, and Steve Miller, assistant for the Gophers, some other like video guys as well that were on the same exact staff. Will be returning this year. It's in Ottawa, I believe. In Canada, it's a little closer to home. In Sweden last year, so that will be the weekend where that'll be Shyak's Super Bowl. He'll be in charge for that game, but off the previous 2 weekends and then a bye week the following weekend there as well, the first weekend in January, which again is what they did last year. They played the Bemidji series, a 2-gamer in that weekend this last year. Now just the single game against St. Thomas in the Christmas / holiday break. So that's kind of a schedule quirk that you're just splitting out that 2-game series a couple of months apart. We're just going to like the non-conference, like got a home and home against Bemidji State. Then you go to Yost, at home against Augustana. Just mentioned Reboyne, who's their head coach. This isn't a surprise.
Him a video montage.
That's right.
Standing ovation.
I'm sure that
was he maybe a 3-year captain or was he just a 2?
I think just a 2. 3-year captains are so unusual. I think
he wore an A though. His
sophomore that sounds.
Right. I remember looking at that thinking, Reboyne is a captain. That's weird.
No, in retrospect, it makes perfect sense because he kind of turned out to be perfect coach material and fairly decent year. His first year in Augustana, I think, fair to say, exceeding expectations.
He hit the over.
He definitely hit the over. And now Chase Brand is gone, but I believe Zemer still have? I feel like he's got. I'm wondering if there's other old friends here that will be competing for Augustana in that series. It's possible. I'll have to check, but it's good to see, and not really much of a surprise. Like we talked especially when Reboyne got that job, we felt like it was a matter of time until St. Cloud would fit them on the schedule. I would assume that this is going to be a multi-year contract. Like I would imagine a return trip to Sioux Falls is in the offing for possibly next season, which I might want to go to that series. A brand new facility there. It looks pretty nice.
Zemer would have COVID eligible.
Okay. So it's possible that we could see Zemer in that series, but that rounds out the
Ben
October.
Trombley.
Yeah, that's right.
Who
former commit.
Will be a junior.
So yeah, that finishes out October. You got Boston College the weekend after. So one difference from last year is no bye week until the middle of November. You got Boston College first week in November, then you got the conference opener versus Miami, then you got your first bye week. Last year we had the bye week in the last weekend of October, which was a little strange. This year you're 6 weekends in a row before a bye week. You get kind of 2 bye weeks out of 3 there. With a CC trip, but then another off weekend for Thanksgiving. Back with Omaha and then at North Dakota to round out 2024. We mentioned the St. Thomas series. Actually, that will round out 2024. Second half in 2025. Again, you can look this up. Nothing too surprising. I mean, no Arizona State trip, sadly, for a lot of St. Cloud fans who are maybe excited to ditch St. Cloud in January for a trip to Arizona. My suggestion is you could move here if you wanted, like I did. But if you want to experience January in Arizona, it's here every year. But maybe next year. Again, with the scheduling model in flux, I was assuming if they were doing these pods that you'd go to every place at least 2 out of 3 years. And if that was the case, you'd think that they would go to Arizona the next 2 years after this year. But now with them going to 10, who knows? But certainly I would expect them to go to Arizona next year.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see the mullet then. So no trip to the desert this year. What else? So we've only got one series against Arizona State. That's the home series. You only got one series at Denver, and that's towards the end of the conference regular season, second to last series in the regular season. You've only got one series versus Western, and you've only got one series versus Miami. The Western series is at Lawson. The Miami series I mentioned is the conference opener in November at home. So that means you play, as we mentioned, the pod mates. You play North Dakota 4 times, you play Duluth 4 times, and then you're also playing Omaha, both the home series and an away series, and you're also playing CC 4 times. So it's a little bit different. In years past, you'd always have just 2 teams that you'd only see one series each. Now with the 9 teams in the league, you're expanding that to 4 teams that you're only seeing one series each. So if that means we only get one series against Denver this year, I guess that's a bit of a break. But having Omaha 4 times, it's not like St. Cloud has really had Omaha's number the last couple of years. So that's not going to be an easy 4 games for them by any stretch. And then you got North Dakota on the schedule for 4 games. You just had them twice, just the 2 games last year. But seeing them a full 4 times this year, we kind of like anything from the schedule that you want to comment on that we haven't already touched
on. I just kind of found it interesting when looking at like the conference schedule when that came out, and just kind of looking at the like I said earlier about one team having a bye, not playing, but also looking at like the stretch of essentially no weeks off that I think Denver has. That basically just looking at the schedule is like they don't get really a week off from a lot of the second half of the season, so they kind of run through a gauntlet there of just always playing.
Well, in the second half for the Huskies, it's just from January 10th to the end of the regular season. It's just one bye weekend, and that's in the middle of February.
Yep, and I don't think Denver even has that bye weekend in there as well. So
it's kind of because you're adding another member to the conference. You're kind of compacting. It's like you're losing one bye weekend, kind of.
And I think that's what you're saying when you're talking about how, on paper it's good, and then they put it together like there's a lot of games in a row, for especially for injuries to happen and whatnot. So, as far as when I'm looking, especially at non-conference, that it was tough last year because we lost to teams we should have beat, and that tanked our pairwise. What I find kind of interesting is, you kind of feel Michigan will be kind of near the top. You kind of feel Boston College again. They also, lost a lot. Maybe also some are in flux because some surprising returners as
said
well.
that Leonard's coming back now. That could be a Logan Cooley situation where he actually sees the suitcase of money like they did in Pulp Fiction and be like, Washington D.C. looks good this time of year actually. Good. But at least he's coming back, and Gautier's not going to be there, but Will Smith, a San Jose draft pick, that team is a dumpster fire without a coach currently.
Yep.
I wouldn't be shocked if he decides college is better than that prospect of being a terrible team and kind of a directionless franchise at this point. So it's possible he could come back. They're going to be a real tough. I think they're going to be a top 10 team. Not as good as they were last year, but it's hard to beat what they were last year.
Yeah.
But with those, so you got two really good non-conference matchups in Michigan and BC. The others, it's CCHA rivals, which
so
you need to make hay.
It's like you need to win those games.
Right.
You could even survive probably going 0-4 against Michigan and Boston College
if you go 6-0 against the others.
If you go 6-0 against everyone else. And that's always
easier said than done too.
Yeah. Right? And that's always, kind of the caveat when it comes to it. Because in the pairwise, how it's structured, as of right now, especially, that bad losses hurt you way more than good wins. I should say, and I think we kind of saw that last night. Last year.
Yeah, that was the reason you didn't make the tournament, is that sweep to Mankato, the loss to St. Thomas. Those were the biggest losses.
Alaska
of the year last year. Alaska, was 30th in pairwise, somewhere around there, 25, 30, something like that. The St. Thomas loss, again, that was an overtime, so it wasn't a full loss, but that was the worst loss you had just from a pairwise perspective, because we mentioned they were 47th. Mankato was something like 35th. That was not a good result either. But you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by losing those games. But at the same token, too, if you are able to win a game at Yost, you're able to win and tie against BC at home. Those can make up for some losses down the road as well. It's just a good mix. I like the fact that you're playing some sexy teams. We should mention 3 out of the 4 Frozen Four teams on St. Cloud's schedule this coming year with BC, Denver, and Michigan. And so it's a sexy schedule. The others that I've seen coming in from the conference don't have this amount of intrigue with 2 series like that. So I like the fact that St. Cloud's being able to schedule teams like this, and it's good for the program, and it's good to see them. It'd be really good to see them beat these teams. They've had a pretty good record against Boston College over the years. See if that stays the same for this time around.
So long and short of it, I look at the schedule. 4 losses, maybe 5, no more than 6.
Why are you such a pessimist? Where are your 5 losses? I just don't see them.
Yeah, I don't see them. So, do you want to switch over to the women?
Yes, let me pull it up. And so let me tap dance, or you tap dance while I pull it up.
Well, first, kind of talk about the portal a little bit. So, Kenzie Hope and Jaden Britt, they ended up entering the portal. Kenzie Hope probably will still be a freshman. She didn't play any games, but she's going to be at Holy Cross. Jaden Britt played 8 games and is transferring over to Maine. I wonder if the head coach for Maine.
We got a St. Cloud tie. This is ringing.
Molly.
Yeah, it's ringing a faint bell.
Molly Ingstrom, who was coached at St. Cloud State.
Was she one of the
she
finalists?
Was one of the finalists for Adulski.
Is she the head coach at Maine?
She's the head coach at Maine.
Okay.
Yep. So that's so I wonder if Jaden Britt maybe was originally recruited there.
Yeah, could be.
And that's kind of the tie there. Defense, and obviously, I think Ingstrom coached the defense when she was here. So that's that might be a tie there. Devin Millwater looks like still hasn't found a team, which we were always
surprising.
Kind of a fan of her, and especially her on the podcast, on the Dump and Change podcast, and her quibs. So, and then who we getting? So we've got Ali Quayle, or Quali. I'll have to get the pronunciation on that. Transferred from Merrimack, 12 points in 32 games. And then Brea Parent, who 11 points in 37 games for St. Thomas last year, also played at Minnesota Duluth. So 2 forwards coming in. Not going to lie, a little bit worried. If they're going to end up taking Grace Delmonico's spot, but I don't think I'm too worried for Grace. I think she's gonna be able to crack this lineup. So.
Famous last words here. Let's knock on wood that you're accurate this time around.
I'm still gonna beat that drum. Hashtag free Delmonico.
Yeah, let's when we see a roster, let's just cross our fingers that we get some Delmonico action this year. But when that team takes the ice, when will that be? I've got some info on that. We mentioned Lindenwood, and they will be starting the season. The women will be going to, Maryland Heights for the lid lifter. That's Saturday, September 21st. Saturday-Sunday series. Again, for some dumb reason, the college hockey season has to start on a Saturday because they date it back from the date of the national title game, which is on a Saturday. So I don't know why they can't just be like, we'll start the Friday before that date. No, it's got to be on a Saturday. So it's a Saturday-Sunday series, September 21st and 22nd. Again, women start a little bit earlier. They end a little bit earlier. So 2 weeks before the men, that'll be a road series. And again, I don't know where that game, if those games are going to be televised. Sure hoping they will. And we'll certainly let you know when that is. Again, with conference schedules, not much of a surprise as far as we know they're going to be playing all 7 WCHA teams 4 times for a 28-game league schedule, meaning a 6-game road schedule or non-conference schedule. Obviously, the order of those teams is always in doubt, but we've got the non-conference schedule. I mentioned Lindenwood, the opening series. They are playing Mercyhurst, who they went out to Mercyhurst last year. Mercyhurst is returning the favor this year. That's the October 4th and 5th series at home. Mentioned that's the same night as the Gopher game against the men, the exhibition game. So again, expecting the Mercyhurst Saturday game to be a day game with the men's exhibition game at night. They do have, I should mention too, week between the Lindenwood opener and the Mercyhurst home opener, you got an exhibition game at home against old friend Manitoba. I think we just mentioned them. Women are getting an exhibition game with them the Friday between those 2 series, the 27th of September. And then the only other non-conference series is going to be a road series at Union Union coming to St. Cloud to start the year this past year. They'll be making their return trip to Schenectady. That's actually going to be the Thanksgiving weekend, the 29th and 30th of November. So they're going to be going to Union then. I mean, from a competition standpoint, not terribly difficult. I mean, Mercyhurst is decent. They always are. I mean, they made the CHA title game last year, and St. Cloud lost a game to them in Erie last year. Lindenwood they handled in the icebreaker. Union, they handled that series at home. From my perspective, though, WCHA is a gauntlet in and of itself. You don't really need to load up as far as a tough non-conference schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting. They're playing 4 road games versus 2 home games. That does make it a little bit more challenging. And some, I would assume that they're going to bus to Lindenwood, but that's going to be a long bus ride. And then you're going to jump on a plane to Union to go to New York. So some longer travel than would be expected for your non-conference slate. But as far as the conference section of the schedule goes, similar to last year, we don't have the gauntlet in terms of you're playing, what was it? Ohio State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Duluth back to back to back to back. You're not doing that this year. It's a little bit more spread out in terms of the 4 other traditional powers. However, similar to last year, it's a road-heavy second half of the conference schedule. So, I mean, from January 10th, you're playing at UMD, they're coming home to play Bemidji. Then you go out to Wisconsin, home and home against St. Thomas, at Mankato, home and home against Minnesota, at Ohio State. So of the last 10 games, 8 of them are on the road. And the only 2 home games are single games in home and homes with St. Thomas and the Gophers. So you don't even have a home series from mid-January to the rest of the regular season. Which again, that means that you've got a home-heavy first half of the conference schedule. You got a stretch there in October and November. You got 5 straight home games, and at some point it's 8 out of 10 home games you have the first half. I don't know why they don't spread that out a little bit more evenly throughout the year, because it just makes that second half much more of a challenge if you're playing most of those games on the road. A couple of series I want to, I guess, like Gopher series, those are always kind of marquee matchups. 2 home and homes. You got Friday, for the home games, you got Saturday, November 23rd, and then both Saturday games for home games in this series. Saturday, February 15th. Those are the 2 games home games versus the Gophers. They actually play UMD 4 straight games in the conference schedule. That's spanning the Christmas break, but your last series of the first half is the home series against UMD, and then your first games in the second half at UMD.
And there's nothing I like more than playing Minnesota Duluth in a 4-game stretch.
And maybe like this year we saw them play like an impromptu exhibition game against St. Thomas right before the second half started. If you remember that, they played like a 2-period game. Yep. Maybe they'll throw something in there, because it will be over a month between games that they play those 2 series. So maybe they want to break it up.
Those 4 games, those 4 Minnesota Duluth games, over under 0.5 goals scored for the Huskies.
Total?
Yep.
I'm going to be
history's not on our side.
I'm going to be an optimist, and I'll go over on that. Well, they don't have Ms. McLeod's gone. She went to Ohio State.
Oh yeah, she went to Ohio State, so screw them.
But I think Gascon is still there. I think she emerged as the starter, but it'll be tough. But I like them. I like playing them earlier in the year. It's later in the year where we can't score against them. So
okay, that's
I like
what
it
we'll say.
And 2 series that I'll throw out there just as some certain intrigue to these. The October 11th and 12th, St. Cloud women play up in Bemidji for a 2-game series. The men play a home and home at Bemidji that same weekend. So that's Saturday, October 12th, you may have a double dip. You can see the women play Bemidji, and then you can also see the men play Bemidji that same game. And similarly, that UMD trip to Duluth, that coincides with when the men play up there. So you can double dip up, make a women and men double header for both Friday and Saturday for the January 10th and 11th matchup, because the men will be up there and so will the women. So that didn't happen this last year, but it happens. There'll be 3 games where St. Cloud women will be in the same building as the men's team. So kind of interesting there. If you're planning on making some trips, you can double the pleasure with taking in the women's game as well as the men's game. So wanted to throw that out there. Any other commentary on the women's schedule that we're breaking? Here on the podcast.
I know you kind of said it earlier, but yeah, the big thing is how last year we talked about how no matter what, you can't escape the gauntlet. Eventually you're going to have to play these teams, back to back to back or whatnot. And yeah, don't have that. I mean, just going straight down the list, Bemidji, Ohio State, and then St. Thomas. Then you have Wisconsin, and then Mankato, and then Minnesota. I mean, that's your first half right there. So you get a little bit of a reprieve from the same bang, 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 drought that you can tell really affected them, the women at the second half of the season when, we ended up having a little bit issues as, kind of Adulski kind of summed up in his press conference. If you remember what he said.
Yeah, but we got to score.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the name of the book about last season. The second half, at least, was we got to score by Brian Adulski to Andrew and Travis.
Yep, exactly.
That's the name of the audiobook.
A little wordy, but we can a little verbose, but we can trim that down. But then and then you're gonna have obviously the 4 against Minnesota Duluth that we talked about, but after that, Bemidji. So you get a little bit of reprieve there. Then it's again Wisconsin, and then St. Thomas, Mankato, and then closing it out. 3 out of the 4 on the road, Minnesota and Ohio State. So that's going to be, kind of a way to gear up towards for the playoffs. But at that time, I think Delmonico will be probably chasing 30 goals at that point.
Well, and two, like you saw this last year, Ohio State was so far ahead as far as the 1 seed in pairwise. This might be ridiculous, but the last conference series of the year might not mean much for Ohio State. So maybe St. Cloud, maybe that series means more. And Ohio State might be resting some regulars and putting their backup goalie in. They won't have McLeod in that because she plays for them now, right? So maybe that's a bit of a schedule break. It's still, you're going to play Ohio State. They're going to be damn good. So, but as you said, it's like, if we're talking about the top 4, that's the only stretch of the schedule where you're playing members of the top 4 back-to-back weekends. If you're not counting the UMD 4 straight games, because there is a month in between those games. So that's like, it does spread it out a little bit, and it makes it a little more palatable, but still the road heaviness does worry me for that second half.
That I agree with. But I think mentally, being able to scatter some wins in there.
We should hope. I mean, last year it was St. Thomas. They dropped games to St. Thomas and Mankato in the second half too.
Yeah, that's true.
So can't take those games for granted. But it would be nice, like coming after that Wisconsin series in the second half, following that up with St. Thomas, feels like it's a little bit more like the potential for like the bottom falling out, which kind of happened towards the tail end of last year. Seems like it's a little bit mitigated with this schedule, but it'll be a tough stretch. You're playing in the toughest conference, and like I said, those top 4 teams, you're playing 16 games against those perennial contenders. That's almost half your schedule against what were last year the top 8 teams in pairwise. So we're gonna see how good this team is based on that conference play. And yeah, the non-conference doesn't look like it's terribly challenging, but it doesn't really need to be because the strength of your schedule is going to come from the conference section of it. And excited to see how this team comes together.
Yep, exactly. So, anything else? I know you talked about rule changes, but we can punt that to the next show.
Those will
correct?
be. It sounds like we've got
They'll be
those voted on at the beginning of June. So by the time we have a next show, which we're not going to tell you when that is because we don't know, but roughly a month, like
roughly a month,
third or fourth week in June, probably.
Fingers crossed. Puck played with high stick is okay. That's the.
Did you
only
see
one
that
I actually
they're
really care about?
I didn't know what the rule was because they said the rule was 4 feet off the ice. And you can't touch it 4 feet above the ice. I thought it was all about the crossbar. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, the crossbar is 4 feet.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Here we go. We're talking about rules like this, so
yeah.
That seems like if you're not by the net, how do you really gauge?
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole. That's like 2/3 of my argument. It's this arbitrary, like you can't really tell if it's even. It has to be the right camera angle, and even that you have a parallax angle anyway that you're not able to scientifically see anyway. So
well, let's see if they make the right move there.
Oh, God, no, they won't.
We probably well, I don't know because they want to go shoulder height, which is an improvement. I'd still think like just anywhere on the ice. Why should a height matter, really?
Yeah.
But
it's still a penalty if you hit someone in the face.
Right.
Like it's and like it's not going to turn into a lacrosse game out there. So it's
I got some takes like we shouldn't, but there's some that I don't like that they're changing, and there's some that I do. So once that's all official, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We
can give our takes on if they should or if they got it right or not.
Yeah, that's always a fun show. They do this every 2 years, do like not wholesale, but when they do change the rule book, it's every 2 years. So we'll talk about those. I still want to touch on
back the Tuck Cliff.
No, don't. But there were, like mentioned, we teased, there was some pairwise tinkering, which we can touch on. Still wanted to talk about some of the coaching hires that can be pushed off. I don't think, did we have anything else for today, or do we have any questions? I think that
we did have a couple of questions. Obviously, Dan Jacobson. What do you think will be the next realignment dominoes to fall? We kind of touched on that. And then the other two questions that we got, are you both fully on the Wolves bandwagon at this point? And then also Will asked, Wolves back, ? So I've watched more basketball over this past 3 weeks than I have probably in the last decade. And I don't get a lot of it. I don't get a lot of whistles, and they'll just stop play with a whistle and there's a fall called, and I'm like, who did what? And then I understand now. First off, I definitely understood how upset everyone was at the end. If you remember the end of the Iowa LSU game in women's college basketball in the Final Four, because that was Caitlin Clark against Angel Reese, and at LSU's last position there was a moving screen called, and that ruined their last possession and essentially gave Iowa's the ball and the victory. And everyone was really upset about that call, and it's like, oh, you can't call it at that time. And it was like, well, it was kind of a moving screen. And I tweeted out, it was like, this looks like every screen ever. I watched any game in the NBA that I've watched during the playoffs for the Wolves, everyone's doing a moving screen. So it's like, okay, now I get why people were upset that one was called, because every screen I saw was some type of a moving screen until they called one foul on one. And I'm like, this doesn't literally happen all game. So I'm now starting to understand why people are so upset at NBA officiating, especially with Joker always being able to really elbow people in the sternum to get space to do a turnaround jumper and whatnot. So, but just the inconsistency there is really mind-boggling to me. And it's been a fun ride, though. And I'm fully on the Wolves bandwagon. It kind of has made me, it's like I fully realize I can't enjoy it as much as obviously like a diehard fan who has suffered for 20 years. But the team seems, it's fun to watch, and really just the post game, Anthony Edwards just seems like a delightful person. Like he seems funny. And his post game press conferences are good. And now Minnesota Tourism has a new slogan that they've kind of ran with too because of him. So,
which is why I missed that.
Bring your ass.
Do we need to bleep that out?
I don't think so.
Ass is fine.
They said that at
that's what a donkey. Donkey is an ass. So
they said
bring your donkey.
Yeah. So apparently if you go to bringyourass.com, it redirects you to exploreminnesota.com. So they're running with it, which they should. So
I have watched maybe 5 minutes of it. I'm happy for the team.
Yeah.
I really don't care all that much. And it feels like beating Denver, there's Minnesota sports parallels to this, where you feel like you slayed the beast, and it just feels ripe for a letdown. Like, I'm going to take Dallas in 5. But that's mostly just my Minnesota sports PTSD speaking. And I really don't have a dog in the fight, because I've been kind of slacking on the NHL.
Donkey in the fight?
No, I don't. I've been slacking a little recently this last round about the NHL playoffs. I just missed some games. Most of the first round games, I watch a lot of those, but for some reason I don't know, lose a little bit of interest
first round's the best round.
Yeah. But my bandwidth just for sports watching has been a little less of late, but happy for the fans. But it's one of those, high aspirations, low expectations. Just don't feel shocked that they're gonna rip your heart out, but just hope for the best. I
don't know. Like, the Timberwolves really haven't had a lot of chances to rip your heart out. So maybe I'm just guns a-blazing on this one.
That's, I think, that's the first step to getting your heart ripped out, is not thinking that they're possible to rip your heart out. Oh, they never done this before. Yeah, but it's like, uncharted territory. Hey, they got home court. This is all setting up for disappointment.
Yeah.
So
they had home court against Phoenix and roasted them. So.
No, well, the Gophers, the Wolves had home court in that series.
Yeah, they had home court there, and they roasted the Suns.
It's a little different when it comes to the conference finals. So this would be, the streak goes back. It hasn't even been to the title round since the 91 World Series of the 4 major men's teams.
Yep.
And that's obviously the NHL didn't have a team there for several of those years. But it's been quite a streak.
North Stars wouldn't have made it there anyway.
It would probably. Well, the Stars, the Dallas Stars, won a cup in that.
I don't think Brett Hull would have.
He wouldn't have come home to embracing his Duluth roots. You don't think that would have happened?
No.
There was a couple of old North Stars. Well, Madonna, obviously, but like Darian Hatcher, Richard Matvichuk, who used to do, I went to the Richard Matvichuk summer hockey camp once because he lived outside Hastings. He was on that 99 team for them. So they still had some old North Stars on that cup winning team. But yeah, they probably wouldn't have won the Stanley Cup because, again, they're a Minnesota team. But I don't know. You know me, I'm a pessimist at heart. So don't take my advice for anything, especially Timberwolves fandom. But knock yourselves out. have a ball, literally, and save a cowboy, ride a donkey, I guess is what I'm saying.
And that about does her.
That about does her.
Huskies Hockey Podcast. I'm Weldie at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers. Andrew, where can they find you?
Always find me at Andrew at greenground.net. And then also you can reach me by email. That's Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com. Summer podcasts. I always like to hear from the fans during the summer. So send me an email or a post over at Green Ground.
Yep. With that, Andrew will probably be tied up, with his pen pal buddy Brian Nadolski, talking about schedules and what's going on with Devin Millwater and things like that.
No,
so
we kept it very professional and brief and curt, and I got out what I wanted to get into.
You got what you wanted, and you hightailed out of there, which is probably what I would do too if I was ever talking to Brian Nadolski about anything.
Thanks, Coach. I think if I had some gum,
Coach.
I'd offer it to you, but I don't have any gum.
Here's some Big Red. And I don't know what to do here. I don't know. I've been debating about just going by Travis instead of Weldie on the podcast. I don't know. Like at 39, do I still go by a nickname, or do you think?
Sometimes I slip and I say Travis. I don't know if I was.
I don't really care.
Outing you.
Nah.
But they both work.
They're. I don't know. I'm debating it.
I don't know.
We'll
it's totally up to you, co-host.
New year, new me, right? Reinvent myself as Travis instead of Weldie. It's like
it would be a big. Would you change?
Eminem.
What do you go on? I thought, at least back in the day, you were Weldie on the
Weldie,
X page. Would you change that?
No.
Okay.
So maybe I'll just
So what are you worrying about?
I don't know. Just because I'm 40, approaching 40, still going by a nickname just feels weird.
I don't think so.
Maybe I'm overthinking it. All right. Well, there you go. If you don't think so, that's what matters. So,
do you go by Weldie like at work? Because that's a little weird.
I don't go by it, but a couple people call me that. So, but I'm like, whatever. Or Travie. I get Trav.
I was gonna say, is anyone on a Trav?
Really
what about Trav?
Actually, yeah, someone today called me Trav. So
don't tell me that's what Teresa calls you.
No,
can't see her being a Trav gal.
No,
I mean she is a Trav gal.
I don't think she's ever called me Trav in her life. I don't think that would even. I think she would be like. I'm gonna ask her. Hey, hon, can you call me Trav from now on, just to see her response?
Isn't it? What was it?
Hell, would I do that?
Was it Omaha's old AD? And I think he's the Nebraska's
Trev
Alberts.
Trev Alberts.
Yep. Who's the only like famous Trev like ever? But you could chart the course as being the world's biggest Trav. Like that's just your name from now on. Try it out for size. I think you might like how it fits.
Next episode. Well, sounds good. So,
yeah. Keep me
until
next
time. Go Huskies. Woo!